Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to ShowX Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado, but spending way too much time in the Howling Abyss instead of Summoner's Rift. Enjoy the show!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to ShowX. You're listening live today at 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this 6th of September, 2020. And welcome, everybody. I can't wait to talk about some news this week. How's everyone going today? How are you doing today, Todd?
I'm doing great.
Hey,
how are you, sir?
Doing well. Good to see you. Ken, yourself, how are you doing?
I'm fantastic now that I'm here.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad you're here then. But hey, hopefully we all are ready to talk about some news today. But to start things off, I thought we'd get in and just kind of catch up a little bit about what's been going on. I know for myself this week, it's been a bit of a roller coaster with all kinds of other things going on. But when it kind of comes down to specifics of geekery, the show, news, and stuff like that, specifically, I know I've just been kind of like playing a lot of games where I could to kind of get myself settled and straight. Surprising amount of time in some Call of Duty Warzone with friends, both in groups as well as on my own. I think it was just this past week that I got my first win that I was responsible for. Is either this week or last I had that I was really excited about. Made me feel good. But then like playing some solos last night, I actually got within the top 10 a couple times and a second place in it that I wasn't really trying all that hard for. I was actually trying to work out some XP rewards by just starting something at a part of the level and get a little XP boost for completing little quests. And so I was kind of like, I need to get 5 of these. Let me just get it, die, get it the next time, do that multiple times versus actually trying to complete. But I couldn't keep myself from not trying to progress some and found myself doing really well. And was like, man, I kind of wanted to get this done quick and just die again to go start the next XP bonus. But I'm actually rolling through this one pretty well. And then last thing, just, oh man, 2 of us left. And
how many hours have been thrown away in your gaming life that started with the words, I'm going to get this done quick?
I thought you were going to trap me in with the question of like, just one more time or just one more click or something like that, let alone like how often it's going to hit you with just, I just need to accomplish one more little thing. And this will be fast.
I started this down a similar path this week, and we'll get into the details when it's my turn to talk about geek stuff. But I started with I'm going to do this one thing real quick. 4 hours later.
At the same time, those are some of the best game moments, right? When you can look back and just go like, where did that go? But oh my gosh, I must be loving this. I must be enjoying myself a lot if that's what's happening. Yep. So I feel good and bad in the same situations, but mostly good. So for me, it's valuable. So I did that, some game with that. Other things I was going to bring up is that I got into a beta, and this is like, I love when I do get into beta games. Some are interesting. I find that where our caliber of show is, a lot of the betas I get into are kind of indie based. And so those tend to be interesting, some better than others. I've had some gems. I've had some challenges. This one is my first VR beta I got brought into. I haven't spent a lot of time into it, a little bit. And it's the first VR FPS that I've really started to spend some time in, which other than like Half-Life Alyx, which is its own wonderful experience. This one coming from another party and coming out,
certainly not indie.
I don't know if it's truly indie. I have to look up the company, but it's one where it was a little clunky playing through it. But I was actually kind of impressed with myself because normally this game has only slide motion because it's designed to be a versus type of FPS. So you on a team versus another team doing capture and hold points, doing deathmatch, those kind of classic game modes. So in that, to do it in VR, you can't use any of those easier or ways to make it more comfortable local motion in VR. Like, actually, for me, the easiest is teleport. You point to an area, you see a circle where you're going to end up, let go, and you're there. And it blinks the screen for a second. You're there like you're blinking your eye. And therefore, you don't feel any sense of motion. And it's super comfortable for people who are prone to motion sickness in VR. And like Half-Life has 3 shades of local motion comfort that are really good. Either the teleport, a point and slow slide 2, and a straight smooth local motion where you use your thumbstick to kind of constantly move as you would in most shooter games and such. That for me is the one that will make me just turn a stomach, because in the way VR works, if I am moving in a way and it's like it's a smooth slide, right? So it's not like it's a walking natural kind of motion. It's just like sliding along like you're on a cart or something, and looking to the side while moving one direction. My brain goes, nope, that is not what I'm feeling, and wants to get nauseous. So this one only has that kind of motion in it. And I was really worried because all the other ones that are out there for VR, like Pavlov VR and a couple others that are the FPS types, people say you need to have your VR legs before you play these games, or else
that makes sense, yeah.
You're just going to not feel good. So I played this one. It did have one comfort option that I'll give them credit with, and that is as you start moving faster, it actually dims. It gives you a tunnel vision. It dims around the edges a little more dark, so you have less peripheral view, because doing that focuses you on where you're going and does minimize some of that nauseousness. And so I give them credit. They at least had an option in there that you can adjust sliders for and things. But it's fairly simplistic graphics. And when I was playing at the time I played, I was like, oh, let me check this out. It didn't have, I think one other person was playing with me. And I didn't realize that we were actually on other teams. So when we saw him, we kind of waved at each other. It was like, hey, and there were some like AI bots in the game as well. So we just kept shooting them. Real slow pace though, but it was interesting to be pulled in. And I'll try to mess with it some more to see how it feels, because this is at least my first time in an FPS for VR. So that's something I'm doing as well this week that I'm kind of keen, just in the sense that it's like a beta for VR as something, which I think is really cool.
That is cool. Are you allowed to tell us a name for this?
I need to look at the stuff yet. That's why I haven't said. I initially looked to see if anyone was streaming it and saw nothing mentioned on Twitch about it streaming. So my assumption out the door is I shouldn't yet. And so I need to look at it. And now, granted, the beta is going to close here in, I think, 2 days. They extended it. It was supposed to end 2 days ago, but they extended it out for more playtime. I don't know if enough people were in it. Don't know. They reminded me with a few emails that it was available. So it could be who knows what. But like I said, it's an interesting thing to look at. And compared to some of the AAA titles I've seen out there, it's not quite at that level. But I can see it could be fun.
It to be, right?
I will say the gunplay felt good. I was able to comfortably look down sights and hit targets in the little target range. And they, like the sniper rifles too, had scopes on them and such that you look through the scope and sure enough, ting. So there is something about that in VR that feels really satisfying. That because it is you accomplishing the task, and you know the difference of just taking a pistol, holding it out in front of you, and pang, 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 and see if you can hit, and going like, "Ooh, wow, that is not how you aim a gun." To then actually taking your moment, line it up, and hey, it hit right where it was supposed to. Nice. So
I think we're going to start changing like the understanding of what a sim is versus what a virtualized version is. So, for example, like. FPSs, if you're playing as a sniper and you're actually feel yourself, like you can see it, and your feeling and your movement actually matters and all this stuff, and it's actually a sim in the sense that you're simulating only non-physically, right? If you know what I mean, like everything else feels real to you, compared to virtualized, where perhaps it's just like what we would consider a normal game these days. My point is, do you think we're going to change the name simulator and no longer allow it to be non-VR one day?
No. We're catastrophically lazy when it comes to naming things. So no.
I don't disagree with that.
Considering how lazy we've been with naming things up to this point, we are not going to split. Idealistically on paper, we would do that. Like, if you have a headset on and you have some sort of controller apparatus in your hands, and you are mimicking the act of looking down the scope of a sniper rifle, and your breathing affects the reticle, and not like in a pre-canned algorithmic way, but like
your actual body motion.
The haptic sensors that you have on your body are sensing the movement of your breathing and causing the gun to move relative to the way your body is reacting. That becoming a simulator and everything else being a virtualized experience. I mean, that's what we should do, but we're not gonna. Like,
No.
it's all gonna get called simulation.
Well, and I
Yeah.
still think we're going to run into the same thing that you can have, my opinion being, you can have a simulation engine, which is there for it to just simulate some kind of experience. And you place gaming within that engine, right? That there's two sides of it. You could build a game, right? That it might be using a simulation engine, but the whole focus of it is the game. And then you could have the things where it's like, the whole point of this is just a simulation and we didn't actually provide you any gaming aspects, do what you will. Stuff. So either way, I did want to mention, it's no longer the top of the show, but I forgot to say it right up front because it's on the title. But we are going to be talking about today as our main topics, the Neuralink that Elon Musk just announced in the last week, as well as Nvidia's big announcement of the new 3000 series cards coming out. So pay attention to that once we're done chatting about all our things. And I do not know why, Ken, your video suddenly like got tiny on us or smaller and bounced around. Does that weird thing.
It's fine on my end. I can't explain it.
Yeah, no. I watched the box resize itself on my stream. Like, what are you doing? Like silly.
OBS
thing.
is just messing with you, man.
It
It's like
really is.
the show's too crisp today. There's no
Yeah,
technical issues.
You
Let me
haven't
just resize
actually
the
screwed
screen
it up
for you.
yet. Why haven't you screwed it up yet? Here, let's do this for you. Thank you, you silly tool.
That's why AI will never take over the world, because AI learned things like that. Oh, I see that you have no issues today, but the last 10 shows we had issues. I've learned that you want.
I need to make sure. I need to make sure that this always happens.
I've learned that the status quo is to have issues.
Yes.
Therefore,
This is what you wish,
Exactly.
clearly.
yes.
Exactly. No, that is what it's going to go. Where I'm like, you thingy, you. So yeah, that's exactly what it's doing to me right now.
So you actually got me thinking about something as we get closer and closer and closer to true machine learning, shall we say. I don't want to say AI, but true machine learning. Is it the right thing to do to drop something into the code of the machine learning that lets you just type in Easter bunnies into a like a dialogue box or something at some point and just causes the machine learning to implode? Like the ultimate door.
Do you mean like a kill switch? You want an Easter egg kill switch?
Something you hide in there to shut it down when it finally goes awry.
Or, Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto, and the machine learning doesn't know what to do when it gets referred to as Mr. Roboto, and it just implodes.
I think we should never be giving AI direct control of critical systems anyway. Like they should be able to make they should be able to automate certain things that we would otherwise, just be doing manually in order to reduce people screwing up stuff. But I don't think we should be like making them decide, should we launch nukes?
That has been at least here in the US, from my awareness, that's something they've done across critical systems, is that they never let a machine do the full answering. They can queue everything up, but the decision maker is still a human that has to say, yes, I agree.
Somebody has to push a button.
And that's what I've seen true of both military application as well as like in any critical system in real or more common industry type things. That yes, you basically try to build any system so that it can't off you on its own.
Not to make this show political, but 4 more years of Donald Trump and AOC will be advocating for full AI control of the military.
I can't see that happening, but regardless, that's it. I will push back and say, Todd, that's a hell of a reach.
I am kind of technocratic, and I'm actually kind of pro the idea of AI having more power, and because honestly, I think that
decision making, like analysis tools,
a complex system like the United States, in all of its industry, all of its minutiae. Every single decision every single person makes. If you want to think about terrorism, all you need is one particularly upset person. Trying to find them amongst literally millions and billions of people. I mean, that's not a job that the CIA, the president, or any human can even consider. Like, what leader really understands what goes on in every single atom of every single thing in their country?
Nothing does, and AI doesn't either. AI can see a lot of patterns, and just like anything else, I challenge when you try to let a computer program a la, what was it, Minority Report, basically try to tell you ahead of time that something's a threat so that person who doesn't actually commit a crime can somehow be persecuted in some way. I am against that wholeheartedly because you can misinterpret.
I would
it's the same thing as like looking at someone's reading list.
As to say that an AI running a military would have a Guns of August problem.
Which I don't know a reference to.
The Guns of August was an idea that part of the reason why there was so much death and destruction during the Great War, the First World War, was because all of the military strategy was based upon the wars that had been fought up to that time, and the technology had changed. Right?
Yeah, okay.
So orders went out, and like, yeah, of course we'll run across fields of barbed wire when there are machine guns 100 yards away. This will be fine. So I don't know if you put machine learning or an AI or what amounts to computer code in the role of military strategy, and we get into a situation like the Cuban Missile Crisis, if the computer is smart enough to initiate the back channels between the two Cold Warring superpowers in order to make sure that the nuclear weapons get out of Cuba, right? And in such a way that everybody gets to save face.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that generally speaking, computers are very, like as you said, machine learning. For those who aren't aware of how machine learning works, the basic functionality is that it learns from past experiences over and over and over and over. Right? You can either give it experiences that already exist, or you can feed it data and let it like sort of discover its own experiences, kind of like how we learn, right? And both of these are important ways to learn, but the problem is that in the end, it can't deal with a new situation. If you then provide it like with, oh look, now teleportation technology exists, it will still try to base on the wars of the past 50 years, is what Todd's saying. So what we would really need is a human in the loop AI, which absolutely exists and are a big thing in
it's used everywhere.
Research papers right now for AI. Because then they can say, yes, no, maybe, sometimes. And our learning isn't quite the same as an AI's learning. So that stuff's all very important still.
And to be fair, nuclear crisis is not a common event. So if the machine gets it wrong, the machine gets to look at it as a learning experience. The rest of us are living the Terminator.
Yeah, potentially. But I think there's actually been a lot of probably nuclear, like there's been a few times that I can't remember the name of the incident. I think it was in the 90s or maybe the knots. But when the USA dropped a nuke, was it over like Texas or Nevada or something? Because like 6 different safety mechanisms all failed at
once. They did not drop a nuke. Get it right. Well, okay, they transported they transported a nuclear weapon in a way that was not supposed to be done. Nothing was dropped, nothing got fired, none of those kind of things. And it went through a whole bunch of security things where it messed up and people missed all the checks and it got transported improperly, thus going outside of all the stuff we try to do for safety measures. So nothing was truly at risk from it, but it showed that something where we should have a lot of security failed, essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, I will absolutely push back on that one to the level of like the potential fear someone might have hearing that. Babs puts on an interesting thing about the AI aspect. I haven't read the whole article, but up on The Verge with his link saying that students figured out that their tests were being graded by AI and they found out how to cheat it. That they basically learned what the AI was looking for to be able to grade something as correct in these essays. And once they found it out, it was like length of sentence or number of sentences, length of words, and some keywords. And they were able to just like hand mash the rest. And they got 100% on everything. Well, no. Right? But here's the thing. Ken, regardless, it shows that there's a potential in any automated process like an AI to find that weakness. Well, I mean, we do it with limited AI in games all the time. Every game we play has some iteration of a quote AI, meaning some level of routines meant to react in more natural reactions that we can almost always find means to exploit. That you can say, every time I do this motion, the AI's reaction is this. Therefore, if I can bait it essentially over here, I can always win. And so there's a challenge there that once you set up the routines of the AI, and yes, you can build continuously learning ones, there's still a risk that goes along with it. But all that to be said, it will be interesting to see, AI is this continuous conversation that goes on. And the challenge is it's too, I would say, broad a statement of subject because it can be applied to everywhere. And people try to say AI is coming. No, AI is here. It's just depending on what level you expand, like what it's doing and how much it's learning.
Those pockets right now.
Yeah, all the things we, like you said, machine learning is a more palpable way people use it as ways to better train or learn algorithms to react to situations based off a known outcome you're after.
And to be fair, machine learning doesn't scare me nearly as much as automation does.
Automation, and like depending on where it's at,
was it 2 years ago? A little over a year ago. It was summer of 2019. There was a big systems engineering conference at one of the big engineering schools here in Norway, and all of the presentations, the focus of the conference was automation, and the engineers were obviously excited about their technology, and rightfully so, because the technology was driving boats into ports and driving snowplows around airports and doing logistics jobs in a warehouse. Like, all of it's really slick in it, and the subroutines or the machine learning inside of these automation systems is really sharp. Like, they can, in some ways, they can self-optimize.
Okay.
The longer that they run, they've got a bus in the town that the university is in that runs between the university and the train station to get you back into Oslo, right? That you can take. It doesn't drive very fast, but it has no driver. Like it is self-running.
That's cool. I love that so much. That's so neat.
Well, see, I do too, except the robot is taking somebody's job.
I was waiting for that. No, I disagree completely.
So, okay, so there's the argument about the original Industrial Revolution displacing something like millions. I think it was in the low millions of people, right?
Yep.
But if you look at it in gross numbers, the number of people that were displaced by the Industrial Revolution was only like 3% of the population. Like, not that big, right? If you include retail sales, food service, cabs, gig driving, like Lyft or Uber, right? Long haul trucking.
That's one of the biggest ones in the U.S. Yeah.
Plus all the logistics jobs. That's like 30% of everybody.
Yep.
And it's I don't know how you handle that level of displacement.
The same way that we've been handling over the past 60 or 100, or to be honest, several thousand years. I mean, you can say the same with the printing press, right? All those poor monks who are originally, transcribing the Bible into new Bibles by writing it out page by page. Like they're messing up their jobs, right?
Sure. But if the 30 Years' War had gone a different way, they'd still be transcribing those things today.
Well,
because they'd be sacred documents. So
I would argue,
I want 30 Years of War to say, no, you don't have to turn into a guy writing pseudocode in some nameless office building someplace if you like lifting heavy things 8 hours a day.
But I would argue that
the numbers to me are the scary bit.
So this has happened throughout industry, throughout life. As you modernize and come up new techniques, new technology, you get rid of some jobs. And hopefully people find new ways to adapt into that new world of what jobs are available. and newer, different types of jobs that should be available based on that new market, because what you're trying to free up or get rid of is some of the monotonous manual labor and the things that are most risk and dangerous to get rid of. Things like agriculture, right? Agriculture through modern machinery, even without AI routines and stuff like that, has taken down the workforce of someone working a field for generating food, at least in the US, to 1 or 2 people versus that. And so you either get the sense that we now have a plenty aspect where now something is more available, or what you get is you get people out of risky jobs to say, now go do other types of things that, depending on what society values as things that we want people doing. And I think it naturally grows.
I understand all of that. We are going to, so the engineers are going to create a problem, and none of the people who have created the problem are going to take responsibility for solving the problem that they're about to create. And that's the issue. That's the issue that I have with this whole thing. Is nobody's talking about 100 million people in America being out of work. 15% of those people are going to get retrained to write pseudocode for robots. And to Unit Zero's point in the chat, we're not replacing all human labor. Like, the engineers are still going to have jobs, and the people writing the pseudocode for the robots are still going to have jobs. And there's still... you're still going to need human beings to drive around all the big cities. Like, the AI only takes over city to city. So, like, if you leave Chicago westbound on I-80 and you don't see another human being for 15 hours, right? An AI can do that, but when you get into Denver, like, you're going to need the human being to take over. So, like, some people are still going to have jobs, and no one is at a economic or policy level is spending any cycles, to my knowledge or my mind, trying to figure out how to fix this.
So
how to solve that.
I'm very much of the opinion that to get there, it's not going to be a binary thing, obviously, right? We're not just going to... I don't think overnight we're going to suddenly have automation replacing every single McDonald's worker, every single bartender, every single job that does not require anything past high school education, right? And any unskilled labor, like, obviously, writing the AI and such, we're still going to need AI engineers. So I can say my job is probably safe-ish, right? I'm probably okay. Research can generally not be done by AI yet. Maybe one day, but right now I can't. These jobs are in danger, absolutely. But in the end, just like in the past, automation just means that we will be able to produce more stuff with less effort and less work. And we need to get to that point. We still need to support these people. And the problem is our economic model. The fact that we're in a capitalistic society where, the more you work, the more you get, the less work, there's going to be much less work available, but more stuff still coming out. So either the richer get richer and the poorer get poorer, which is what we're heading towards, or we're going to move to another model where perhaps there's some sort of universal basic income that slowly increases over the years as automation comes in. And then we could perhaps start teaching society to actually produce stuff that isn't just, your life has more meaning than to produce mobile phones and sneakers, children. Right? Perhaps we can get to the point where we all just become artists and things we enjoy. Right? That's
I totally agree. I'm totally on board. I want to skip the 30 years of destitute people lying in the streets of
agreed. Me too.
Even mid-sized cities across the whole world. Like I want to skip. I want to skip the generation of pain and suffering that's going to come at the start of this whole thing. Like I
totally agree with you.
Want us to be forward thinking enough to have the solution ready to go. And not to make it binary, but to make the landing significantly softer than I'm afraid it's going to be.
So
and that just could be, it could just be me being a pessimist, because I'm one of those too. So who knows?
Well, is it on, because I know Ken and I have talked about this to some degree, about how engineers in their own wisdom are always just pushing to build the next thing or answer the question, right? Without the potential, rarely, if ever, looking at the ethical implications of what that new technology, skill, ability, or thing may do, because they've been able to turn around and rely on the implementation of that society or someone else who's making the decision of where it gets added as to being the ones to decide the ramifications. Like, okay, just because it exists doesn't mean we have to use it everywhere, but it's now we're aware of it. And so it's up to society and those people who are designing, because the engineer doesn't, granted, I say engineer, that's a very broad term, right? Every engineer has a skill, but the person who designs and builds the new car isn't necessarily the person who designs and builds the new road or the new infrastructure for how cities are laid out based on that road. And so
100%.
It's always lots of steps to implement, because just because we come up with, automated driving technology that could take out every long distance driver out there for trucking, because it exists. Elon's already done that. Basically, the technology exists. There's 3 or 4 major trucking companies already testing it around the world. And so then the question becomes, how do you implement it? As you implement it, what do you do with your workforce? What opportunities do you provide? Do other things? So there's a way to do it. So yes, could random, just if you throw out all this new tech and ability, it completely disrupt our current balance of how things are done? Yeah, it'd be crap. But hopefully the implementation of those technologies and how they're rolled out into the workforces to replace allows us to answer that question along the way. And that gives us that kind of stepped approach. That's what my hope would be. Because I get giggly about tech, right? That is one of my joys. That is why we have the subjects we're going to talk about today on the show, is because it's new shiny tech. And for me, that's like, I don't know about anybody else. And I know there are people who have a very different opinion of seeing the landscape like me, but I just giggle at seeing what humanity is coming up with when it comes to technology and the application of it. And sometimes it's just for frivolous fun, GeForce, new cards. Sometimes it's potential changing the world, like Neuralink. And so I do get jazzed about that. And for me, these kind of ethical discussions and things like that are a separate one, but I understand why they matter.
And that was a really interesting introductory topic for us to chat a little bit about. I think we should maybe return to that one day as a full topic, because automation alone is one topic and AI as another, because they are intrinsically and linked, but also entirely separate discussions.
And also the future.
Yeah,
they are coming.
It will be the future. It's not
a question of if, it's a question of when.
I agree entirely. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll have to go back to it, because I've had some arguments like this with my older brother a few times about when tech will hit in certain ways. Dang it, I love being able to drive my own car, Babs. Put it that way.
There's nothing wrong with you being able to drive your own car on your own private land.
Well, say again, we've had this conversation too, Ken, because screw that noise. So,
no, I'm sorry.
Outside of this conversation that we will have, I will go back, Todd, because you have been doing some other things that have been gaming related this week as well.
I should really go last.
Okay. Well,
okay. Do you mind if I jump on next?
I don't. Can I share one more thing real quick though that I did want to kind of throw out there just to see, because it's hopefully potential for adding to the show again. Things to, as I continue to try to find little ways to tweak and implement and improve. What I want to share is I just purchased, because I've been watching these things for a while now and seen some reviews, and the price just hit a point where I was like, it's might as well just give it a shot. And I'm trying to use a little bit of this logic, still new to me. I'm still learning some new aspects of optimizing life and what is important for me. But one of those theories or things I've heard of from a few different sources is that when you spend money, you should focus on things about actually solving problems you currently have versus just acquiring new things that may or may not bring you some kind of joy. So with that logic in mind, as well as it's still shiny, I am sharing that recently in tech and the ability for us to capture video and share, there have been these slew of devices that have been coming out from who knows what manufacturers that are essentially USB 2.0 HDMI capture cards. And for people who are normal gamers and stuff like that, you might think of the Elgato, like USB 3, 4K cards they have and stuff like that, but they start at like $80, $90, go up to $140 or something like that for you to be able to stream in and pull in an HDMI source. Now, those admittedly do a pass-through, so you can send it in and then out to your monitor and do it this way. This is just a capture. And so if I were to like play an Xbox or something like that, I could plug it into this card and play it on my computer screen and stream for it, but it comes as a video source. I acquired this because right now, for you guys to watch me via the DSLR I'm using for my camera. I have it through USB directly into the computer, and I'm able to live view it. But then to bring it to the stream, I have to do it as like a window capture of what's being put on my monitor. And so it's like an extra layer of in there. This should allow me. Yeah, right. And so it takes more CPU. It makes more on top of everything I'm doing to try to bring stuff in as I'm putting everything together. So this one, like I said, there's a slew of these that range from this is the lowest price one I've seen, $13, up to I've seen the same basic one for about $30. And having looked at reviews of a whole bunch of them, they all seem to work surprisingly well as just a raw capturing a video source in that can be then captured as a direct video input into OBS or into any of these streaming apps. And so my goal is to give that a shot, and instead of using the USB 2 cable directly out of the camera, trying to use the HDMI out to see if it gives it a smoother video signal. Because for me, you can see like my motion is okay, but it does depend heavily on how well the software that is pulling off the camera is working with. So just kind of throwing that out, that I'm playing with some other tech that I've seen out there, because I'd watched some reviews on this a couple months ago of these various cards, and it sounded like a good option. And at this price, I was like, screw it, I'm going to give it a shot. So that's something I wanted to share real quick as just last thing I've been kind of looking at, tweaking with for the show. But Ken, yes, what would you like to share?
I really wanted to mostly talk. So, okay, I'll briefly mention that my reading, I used to talk about that a lot on the show, and I just haven't read anything in like 2 weeks. Like, I think I listened to an audiobook for a total of maybe like 45 minutes. And it's not because I suddenly hate reading or anything. I'm just so busy with work just now, so I've barely done anything with reading. Same with my gaming. I was playing the newest Mass Effect. I've only managed to put in about 45 minutes in the past week. So I really haven't done much in the way of gaming. So I'm not talking about any of that stuff like I normally would. Instead, I'm going to talk about one of the projects I have at work, which is really interesting. I mentioned before, but it's kind of evolved rather suddenly into something different. So you guys will remember that originally I had this research project into an artificial intelligence which would control Factorio in both the decision-making aspect as well as in the optimization of what is being done aspect. So it was quite intrinsic and quite a complex problem, because this isn't one AI doing everything. It was one AI making decisions. Those decisions were being carried out by dozens of other artificial intelligences of different types and such. It's a very complex network, right? It's really tough. I sort of realized that this is doable, and I definitely plan to still do it. The problem is that what I wanted to do was make it into a competition. So I wanted to design my own AI and everything with my team, and we would together produce a bunch of these AIs and publish something saying, "Look, it works." But mostly we're trying to just say, please, a conference out there, would you please host us? And we will advertise this as a venue for other researchers to post submissions to of their potential artificial intelligence solutions to these sub-problems individually, or the whole major problem of trying to optimize Factorio entirely. And this was a great idea, and we plan to go back to it, but really we realized we need a basis. We need to prove that it works so that we can point to existing work and say, venue, can you please host us? Also, here's the existing work proving that it is a thing and it works. Because my career so far, I've done nothing with video games. All of my career so far has been with artificial intelligence for employee scheduling, for real world optimization problems, and for genetic prediction now with animal breeding and such. So my work has been entirely separate from this, and so for me to ask to host a competition like this, I need some proof. I need to be able to say, look, I can actually do this. So we looked at all the problems that we were trying to solve, and we narrowed it down to the simplest one we could find within Factorio, which was you have some input and some output, and you need to connect the two by belts. And you want to do that within a specific area. So say you have a 15 by 12 grid, and you want to try and pass from A to B. That's it, right? Very simple. Okay. But then you add on some extra layers. It's not just belts. There's belts of normal speed, faster speed, and fastest speed. There's 3 different types. You have splitters, so that one belt can turn into two, or two belts can turn into one. You have underground belts, so that they can sort of overlap, but only if they're going from the same type to the same type. So describing all these rules is kind of an intrinsic part of it because you have to describe them mathematically. So I've written an integer programming model which does all that, and it says, look, this is what it looks like. It's a page of just pure ugly looking maths. And I'm glad that I managed to finish that this week, so that's good. And the plan is now to just make an AI which does it. And that's the easy part, funnily enough. And then once we've done that, we can have some results and just push it out into a nice journal paper somewhere and say, hey, look, nobody's done anything with this video game before in this kind of research. We're the first to do it. Isn't it cool? Please, here's all the data we used. Please try and beat it with your own AI. And then from there, that's our starting point of doing everything else. And the nice thing is, in terms of video games and hobbies and such, the output of this is that I can actually upload the mod at the end to the Factorial portal and say, hey, look, here's a nice little AI that will optimize and produce the best result. You just let it know where the input and the outputs are, and it will make the most optimal solution for passing stuff through. And how you decide the quality of the solution is either going to be by minimization of resources. So I want to use as few belts as possible. And or you can say the ratio of things being passed through, like I want 50% of objects to go from my input to go to these two outputs. Or it can be the throughput. So you want not only this number of objects passing through to the output, but at a certain rate. So all these different things are going to be different quality measures as well. So it's quite fun. It's a really interesting problem, and it's nice to have something that's going to probably be out in the next couple of months and be finished in the next couple of months, rather than this massive project that we originally had that was going to be, a 5-year kind of thing. Realistically, I need to kind of cut it down into sub projects that are attainable. So that's been a lot of fun, and I just wanted to mention it because I've opted in to do a seminar. So I work in part with this organization called Beacon, who own this massive building here on Michigan State University campus, which they basically study evolution in action, both with biological evolution and with artificial evolution, like what I do. And I'm presenting a seminar with them later in the year, talking about this work. So what I'm going to try to do, if they'll allow me, is I'm going to also stream it out to Twitch and to Facebook. Well, actually, maybe not Facebook because I've deleted mine now. Just to Twitch, maybe YouTube or whatever. And you can actually see the academic side of it if anybody's particularly interested, and see how a game like Factorio can be optimized from the perspective of somebody who is, working in artificial evolution.
Nice. That sounds like a heck of a project and an interesting transition from what you originally do. The nice thing is it actually sounds like you've scoped it down to something that's a little more attainable.
Absolutely. Attainable in a short time period as well. I mean,
there's value to that. That really is, because otherwise you could be spinning your wheels for a while before anything gets accomplished. Right.
Absolutely. And the problem is that while this would be an impressive thing for my career once it's done, up until then it doesn't look great, right? I mean, 4 or 5 years of no progress.
So, look,
so Dr. Papers out along the way is important.
Yeah, Dr. Reed is still working on this playing video games for his job thing. Yeah. I see how that works. You researching again tonight, Ken? You researching again? I saw your stream.
So I've actually been turning off my Steam. Like, I'm on a peer offline on Steam where I'm doing Factorial now. I'm so afraid my colleagues just like, oh yeah, 5 hours today, huh?
Wish I'd set up my program around a game. I see.
I've been doing research this whole week.
Babs threw into the.
It's very difficult actually to work in Factorial.
Honestly, Wayne, all that means is that Ken is the smartest guy in the room because he figured out
doing what he loves, right?
Video games as his job that's not a part of the influencer bubble.
Yes, without having to be a Twitch streamer or show off like his hairy cleavage. So yes, he's doing it right.
Like he doesn't have to have an OnlyFans or a nudes and lewds section that you can only access if you're a $50 Patreon.
I don't have to have that, but
Yeah, that's just bonus.
That's like, I don't know if you do or not. You just don't have to.
No, that's wonderful. And actually, it's interesting because
I love the.
By the way, Chad, you can check out Ken's OnlyFans at onlyfans.com. No, I can't do that. Never mind. Sorry.
Sorry. Dr. Scottish the Reed.
Ah.
Or would it be Scottish the
How many
Rod?
times my students ask me, like,
Where your show is and if they can watch it?
yeah, people are, like, my students constantly ask me, so you talk about this podcast, where can we find it? I'm like, nope,
Yeah,
you can't go there. You're not allowed to see it.
you can never see the podcast.
Nope, it
Because you'll
doesn't
never
exist.
see him the
Well,
same. Well, and Babs in the chat shared a link to a wiki about a old program that he said was like what you were doing, but only yours is for Factorio, called Robot War. That was apparently a programming game written by Silas Warner. This is back in like the 80s. That it was, along with Robot Write, was really developed in Tudor programming language on the Plato system in the 70s. Sorry. And then it was commercially adapted by Apple in the 80s. But the whole point of it was to write basic code to set up a AI for a robot that was in a virtual space and was to compete against other robots. And it had to scan via radar pulses to find them and then shoot them to destroy them, and had to be the last robot standing. And so basic programming that you had to go in there and then compete your code versus others.
God, and all in BASIC? Yuck.
Well, and so the example they show is scan, or what is this? Yeah, basic is there are 34 registers that can be used for the variables of the IO function. Oh yeah, that takes it back. But it's like aim +5 to aim to radar, loop. If radar is,
the guys we do these days are like import AI, go.
Yeah. Oh, you have to have you have the ins and outs, and you have to define it. But yeah, exactly. Anyhow, that's really cool. So awesome, Ken, that you've adjusted and you're still doing it along with gaming and such, but find your way there. Now, Todd, we're going to give you till the top of the hour to talk about what you've been doing with gaming, since you've picked up something new this week. That isn't Europa Universalis 4 or whatever.
No.
What is going on?
It's before Europa Universalis in the timeline of Paradox Grand Strategy games.
Okay.
And
what are you playing
Crusader,
with?
And it's called Crusader Kings 3. And it's really good.
Okay.
I thought you said you weren't particularly interested in this, sir.
I wasn't, and then I saw it was a $30 game.
Oh,
so you must have got a deal on it, because it's $50 right now on
that
Steam.
Amount of mechanics for $30? Yes, please. I will take all of that.
It's because all their workers are now working from home, so they don't have to pay for all the office costs.
You're right.
It cuts down the prices
on their office space. Exactly. I was hoping it was on the, because I paid about $3.25 Norwegian crowns for it, which is a little less than $32, given current exchange rates. So your mileage may vary a little bit depending on where you are, but it's in the $30 range. And they just, EU4, for all of its goodness, when you get into the 18th century, can be a little clunky performance-wise. Like, it really starts to lag when there are hundreds of thousands of troops on the screen moving at one time in stacks of 50 or 60,000, right? And you have 600,000 troops in your army, and you're moving them in 60,000 stacks. Like, it does get a little clunky. This, so far, has been silky smooth. And I've played about 180 years of the timeline, and the span of time. So there are two start points. The first start point is 1st of January 867.
Okay.
And the second start point is in 1066. So 1066 is important because the Vikings were finally kicked out of Great Britain, and William the Conqueror happened, right? So I started at 867, and I started as a duchy in Poland.
Okay.
And I managed to unify the Kingdom of Poland and the Kingdom of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Estonia and the Kingdom of Denmark and the kingdom of Moldavia, and the kingdom of what's the name of it? Another Polish. It's like a Polish Slavic region. I can't even remember what the name of it is. And a couple of others. Like, I created this huge empire in 180 years.
Nice.
And I have to tell...
Sugar, man, you're using your new world smarts to take over the world.
Tell me about it. It's fantastic. But I have to tell these two stories. Actually, yeah, I have to tell you two stories. So, I had a king, and my king had a son. So the line of succession of my house was preserved. And the important difference between Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis is that Crusader Kings is much more character focused rather than nation focused.
Okay.
So you, as the player, play as a character, and that character has holdings, and those holdings start as there are basically 4 levels: counties, duchies, kingdoms, and empires. So you start out, you could own like only one county, or you could own one duchy that's made up of several counties, or you could start as a king, or you could start as the Byzantine emperor if you wanted to.
Huh.
All of that is open to you. Like, the only 2 people that I've found that you can't play is the Pope himself and the head of Venice, because Venice starts as this weird republic government type, and I don't think they implemented that yet, but I bet it's coming in DLC. So, yeah, actually, can you pause that right there?
Yeah.
By chance? Perfect.
Yep.
So you see on this screen, Poland, Ruthenia, those are kingdoms. Novgorod turns into a kingdom. Denmark's a kingdom. I have that, essentially. Okay. So it's basically where the border is between Poland and Hungary, north. And all of it pretty much is mine. And then it heads back down on the top side of the mountain range there on the right-hand side of the screen down towards the Black Sea. Okay. Anyway. So
one true emperor, Todd.
What's that?
One true emperor, Todd.
The one true emperor. Okay. You can start playing you can continue playing the trailer. So I have a king, my king has a son, and it turns out my son is gay.
Okay.
Is that actually a thing in the game? That's pretty deep.
Sexuality is a thing in the game.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yep. I'm actually, that's the last thing we're going to talk about, because Polygon, of course, is Polygon, and decided it wanted to talk to its Vox reading base and wrote some stupid. So I'm going to get to that last. Anyway, my son is gay. My son also has a wife, because continuation of the bloodline.
Oh, you can't be expected to, regardless.
So I have a king who has a son who has a wife, and suddenly I get a random event where the wife is trying to seduce me as the king. So my daughter-in-law is trying to seduce me.
This is quite realistic to history, to be fair. Again, I think this is
something I expect. And I'm sitting back going, well, I gotta have males in my bloodline to inherit my titles. So I let that happen. So while my son was not sleeping with my wife, I was sleeping with his wife. While my son was not sleeping with his wife, I was sleeping with his wife.
Well, he can't really be that upset. I mean, if he's not really into women, I mean.
So here's the thing. What's so silly about this? So my character, the king, dies. My son inherits all of the titles. So I, as the player, take over the son's character.
Oh, no.
Right? I can then take the choice to seduce my wife, even though I'm gay, and have children with her.
But
okay.
So they were all daughters. which leads me in to story number 2. So that son had 4 daughters, and the way the inheritance rules for titles were based on the type of area that I'm playing in, which is not Christian and not feudal yet in 867. So this was about 900 when this was all happening. So I have 4 daughters. I also happen to have the title to 4 kingdoms by that time. And so when the son died, the titles of the 4 kingdoms got split up amongst the daughters.
Okay.
Right? But there are no males in the line of succession yet because nobody's had kids. So, as it turns out, the rules of succession then pass to siblings if there are no heirs in the family. So I noticed that I was first in line for the kingdom of Pomerania. Yes, for the kingdom of Pomerania. And I said, so all I have to do is murder my and I get the kingdom of Pomerania back? So I did. And then I married one of my sons off to the child. I think it was a cousin marriage, honestly. So I did a cousin marriage. So dark. I did a cousin marriage with my other sister, and I found my
dark, but it sounds so realistic, man.
I was gonna say,
I know. It's so
this sounds like medieval politics.
Yeah. So I did a cousin marriage, and I found myself first in line of succession for the other throne. So all I had to do was kill my other sister. So I did. And I got all my kingdoms back by killing all of my siblings, by murdering my siblings.
You just made sure to
back.
Focus the bloodline. Yeah.
Yep. And then I sent one of my children off to marry the king of Denmark, who then died, and their son then died, and so I, as the father, how does that? Let's see.
Father-in-law.
How does that work? Father-in-law of the dead king ended up inheriting the kingdom of Denmark.
Okay.
Like all of a sudden, I get this huge, this bunch of land in Scandinavia and current day Denmark, and some stuff in the British Isles, and some stuff in Italy, and some stuff in Iberia. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I look, and it says that I have the title of the Kingdom of Denmark. And yeah, it's been fantastic. I have had so much fun playing this game and doing some of the silly stuff that you can do. It's weird because I do have to give Paradox credit for this. So in EU4, they have these things called nope, I'm not good. Institutions.
Okay.
They have these things called institutions, and the first institution in EU4 is called feudalism.
He's gone.
Oh no! I was gonna say, right at that point again, to be like, I thought it was a dramatic pause. It is the hiccups of the interwebs that caused it.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, is he basically stumbled upon, the medieval Sims / Desperate Housewives Game of Thrones version.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You got to the point where you said feudalism, and then Wayne thought you had a dramatic pause, but then it was that.
If only. And so feudalism was introduced to the world in 1066, according to EU4. And so all the countries in Europe, most of the Middle East and the Russian steppes, parts of North Africa, through the Levant, have all adopted feudalism by 1444. right? Some of the places in the Far East haven't yet, and like the steppe hordes of Russia or Manchuria haven't.
What's a definition of feudalism? It's a phrase that I've heard thrown around a lot, and I know it's sort of like a stepping stone in human history and in our understanding of culture and technology, I guess. But what step is it exactly? Like what do you? I know
That's a really good question. I don't know that I have a dictionary definition of feudalism, so
okay, I'll just take it as well. What I said then is a step in.
Oh, it totally is.
Mankind.
So it's according to dictionary.com, the dominant social system in medieval Europe in which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service, and vassals were in turn tenants of the nobles, while the peasants were obligated to live on their lord's land and give him homage, labor, and a share of the produce in exchange for protection, right? So serfdom, essentially.
Gotcha.
Yep.
That's horrible. Okay, got it.
So anyway, so it according to EU4, feudalism hits in 1066, and that's the important data point talking about EU4. I just adopted feudalism in my campaign of Crusader Kings 3, and it's about 1050.
Okay, so you're a little early.
Hit that. They set up the game mechanics, I think. Excuse me 1 second.
He's just consulting with developers.
Yeah, I'm consulting with Paradox, who's in my ear. It has the look that if you were playing casually, as in like not trying to stack bonuses and things to do it super, super fast, if you were playing casually, that the game mechanics are set up in such a way that feudalism is going to hit for some random country outside of Western Europe, the feudalism would hit in about 1066.
Okay.
Which I thought was a kind of a neat touch. So
nice.
their games are sort of internally consistent.
I love that.
That is actually really good.
Yeah. It's I'm having so much fun.
No, that's good to hear, Todd. That is.
It is a little derpy. I had an army of 40,000 before I adopted feudalism, and now that I have adopted feudalism, I have an army of 7. But I don't know if that's some sort of weird display issue or something. So hopefully, like, I shut the game down, obviously, to do the show, and I may boot it back up either today or tomorrow, just to see if that's something that you have to restart to work out, because sometimes Paradox games have those things.
Features. Yeah. Features.
Especially when it's just been released. I mean, there's bound to be bugs and stuff.
Not even a week old, and there's been a couple of hotfixes already for it.
That's good.
So, yeah, no complaints.
Nice.
So
well,
you said you had.
You know what? I'm not even going to bother with this, and I'm not even going to bother with this Polygon article because it's stupid.
Okay.
Well, no, I say I'm looking forward to hearing, as we did with Europa, kind of your exploration of the game as you go forward and find out what other mechanics you really enjoy. If there's some way you find to undermine another kingdom because of, some kind of unknown betrothal or other things and things like that, because it sounds so dynamic and with so many features to it.
So I told you about the inheritance rules and the murdering of siblings, right?
Yeah.
So as a tribal, I'll just say a tribal nation or a tribal character, you have the ability to declare a subjugation war once per lifetime.
Okay.
And you can subjugate anybody that has a title below your level.
Oh, interesting.
If I'm a king, I can declare a subjugation war on anybody that has a duchy.
Gotcha.
Which is, that's not necessarily a lot of land, but still, it's more than sort of one province at a time. But I'm an empire rank, which means I can declare a subjugation war on a kingdom. And the Grand Principality of Hungary lies directly to my south. And if I can get my army back, my one subjugation war is going to be to essentially take all of Hungary and bring it into the great Polish Empire.
Yeah, you just want to help them understand how being with you is their best option.
Obviously, right.
Civilized, you know, if it wasn't for all the damn chaos in the Balkans, like, we would still have a Kaiserreich today. So, you know, alternate histories and stuff.
No, it'll be fun to hear how that plays out. I can't wait to hear more of these because we had so many good stories come out of Europa from you about it. So this will be interesting to see. And being that's the same company as a whole, it should be fun and easy to kind of hear those similarities in gameplay that you're going to experience.
So the one thing that I'm starting to kick around inside my head is because of the overlap of the timelines between CK3 and EU4, of playing a CK3 campaign to essentially 10th November 1444, and then when the utility to convert the save game from a CK3 save file to an EU4 save file, when that comes out, because it's gonna convert the save file into EU4 and then
you can play it straight through it.
EU4, those two games would essentially make 1,000 years of
that's cool, man.
Running
I love that.
And, you know, people have done mega campaign videos before.
Yep.
And so, but you had to do a lot of conversions. Like, you had to go from Crusader Kings to EU4 to Victoria to Hearts of Iron. Like, if you wanted to do the full, like, 2000.
Yeah, I remember you shared that you had shown how people had done it before.
Or whatever. I think 1,000 years is more than enough. and you know, that's going to take like 30 hours or more to play a single one of. And yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm going to make videos out of that maybe when we finally get to the point where we can convert the save files or something. I'm not sure. But
that's a good way to get a nice Twitch campaign going. Like I think one of the toughest things for Twitch streamers to do is to find some sort of continuity between their games, and I think something like that could be quite interesting because then, you know, people who join in for the ride and can be there from the start, and, you know, it's kind of a fun thing for a community to do together. Yeah.
Yep.
Like it.
Yep.
All right.
Agreed.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that. We're going to take a break so we can get charged up here and then come back. And I think I'm going to lead things off because I know it's the one I'm going to have more to talk about with the new Nvidia announcement. And then we will see when we get through with that how much time we have for talking a little bit about what Elon has shared with that. But with that, you are watching us here at VtWShowX on Twitch as we continue to discuss all the fun things we've been doing with gaming and what's been coming out recently. And now we have much more to look forward to when it comes to the hardware side of things for all of us as gamers. So check that out right after this break. I'm going to be playing a quick OC Remix song, Cannon Fodder, for I don't know how many people ever played that game. It was a fun little top-down squad-based thing from OC Remix. This one called Cannon Straits. And so check that out, and we'll be back in just under 4 minutes.
You're listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back. So, yeah, we'll see if the robots online love that remix as well as much as you guys did, and whether we get muted for that break, as obviously a mix on Dire Straits. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. One of the big things that recently came up this week, and not that we are by any means the first that'll be talking about it, but I'm curious to see what you guys will all think. We just got an update or an announcement that came out from Nvidia, and this was, it was announced by, is it their CEO or such, that comes out and does all his little now kitchen displays or whatever he does, where he brings it out and talks from the kitchen. Basically, there was a 40-minute video that showed up as a live stream on all the channels, Facebook, and I think they even did it on Twitch as well as their own channel and such. But where we have been hearing about it a lot lately, we knew that Nvidia was going to be coming out with a new series of cards. More than time. In fact, they've been on a schedule lately of about every 2-ish years for newer technology, where back probably 10 years plus ago, they used to release a new series of card every year. And in more recent time, they've done a series of card, and then you might see an upgrade through either a TI or, in the more recent with the 2000 series Super version of those cards to come out. So this is something that we were all anticipating, and hopefully you've at least heard some about, because we're not going to get into all the nitnode numbers about all the new things with this new card series. But I did.
We can start talking about the price points, though.
I did think it is important to bring up and talk about as a whole, and because it wasn't just the hardware they released, it was also a lot about their technology that's going along with this series. So the new series, the 3000 GeForce RTX 3000 series of cards. They did this thing, and they opened up with what I thought was a really neat kind of throwback video. And I'm going to share some of this on, basically, I'm just at the NVIDIA site because they have it all built out as a kind of a replay of the whole thing of what they did. And what was cool about this video they first kind of showed out with is they kind of linked back to the history of some of their cards. And it's just kind of fun to watch as they did, like, oh, the 256, the 690. They skipped several in the meantime, but it's kind of like some of the big generational ones they had, just as they started upgrading all their silicon and new things going forward. Doesn't really matter, but it was a fun little throwback they did. They actually started out the presentation talking more about the technology and things we've been seeing about rendering and stuff, about how NVIDIA does things. They have some very significant technologies like DLSS, which is their dynamic upscaling technology. They use it for AI, as we talked about before, routines to learn how to take a low resolution signal and upgrade it to a very high resolution output that, and basically you're telling the card to render at a lower resolution, but output it at a higher one, thus saving a lot of the actual horsepower needs. And in the current 2000 series, they've had DLSS 1.0, and they're announcing with this new an update that's 2.0. Other things I do want to posit on that part of the video is they're showing the card. One of the coolest things that nobody was really ready for, I guess, because there had been some leaks online about the overall size, look, and feel of the card series coming out. But everyone saw that it looked to be bigger than previous ones, at least what was leaked. What they actually showed is they made a die that is significantly smaller than anything they've done before. The board itself is double the density of anything they've done. And in doing so, the physical board is shorter than any of the current series of cards that you can buy today. They instead use that extended, what we see as the overall package of the card, to put in what is here seen as a cooling technology, where they have heat pipes that actually hang out the back, and this really cool airflow design that they're doing a push-pull thing where on the bottom side of the card, heat is going in and out directly through the rear fans. And in the back of the card, it's pulling cold air up and just venting it basically into the top of the case through as hot air, going through the heat pipes and heat sink there, such that the rear fan of the case can exhaust that heat. And so unlike a lot of what we've seen with triple like fan solutions and stuff like that, is that they all just kind of blow the air somewhere around the case and just cool the card itself. But you now have to dissipate that heat from everywhere in the case. This one, they're at least trying to talk about it, is they're dumping it where you would normally have heat. Now, the challenge there is that might be directly into your CPU cooler or something like that. So it kind of depends how your cooling solutions work. But I like that it at least shows a level of how that works. So Jensen, Wine, is it Wine? It's I forget how to say his last name, but announced the cards, talked about the tech. Did you guys see the announcement at all?
No, I did not watch it.
Okay, cool. So like I said, it's about 40 minutes, and they talk about there's a graphic showing the heating, cooling kind of solution. So interesting concept to see how it works. You notice they do kind of throw it directly over the CPU thing. So in mine, it won't be an issue because I have a water cool kit that blows it right out. And so I don't think it'll hurt me, but I can see how that could be an issue, as Babs kind of brings up. Lots of shots of the cards itself. They first started the announcement with the RTX 3080 as their being their flagship card, the main one they're trying to push people towards as their premier card. They also showed the 3070, a generation or a lower version of it, and the newly basically renamed version of the Titan from the previous series, the 3090, which is really what the leaks had come out about and had shown what was potentially a monster card. So let's see. I guess we'll talk about the cards first and then get into some of the other tech with it. And wow, that's exciting. You mentioned...
Can we talk a little bit about the pricing first? Because I had seen nothing about this except for memes about the price ranges.
Okay, so we can get into the pricing. So there's all this tech about it. And actually, I'll just jump back up to the first part where I showed with the tech and the announcement here of what it is. So the 3080 comes out and he shows it. And it's always silly because he pulls the cards out from somewhere around the kitchen. But don't need to worry about the number of cores there, 8,000 some cores. It's got 10 gigs of GDDR6X RAM. So it's the latest X generation of RAM from Micron, which is almost double the bandwidth of what just GDDR6 has. Very significant. And a release price of basically $700, $699 for what they're calling their flagship card. The 3070, which is 8 gigs of regular GDDR6, has just under 6,000 CUDA cores and a price point of $500, $499. And
how does that compare to the current standard of cards that are out there?
So I have an RTX 2080 in my PC right now, and I paid about $699 for it.
Yes,
last year.
And a friend of mine just bought a 2080 Super like 2 weeks ago. and paid basically the Super. I think she got it for about $699 ish as well, somewhere in the same price. Point that for that as just bought it. The key is every one of these cards, according to no actual number release, just Nvidia's own relative scale of performance, showed that they had what was it? They scale it from like an old 980 as their 1.0 threshold, and they go up to like 5-time threshold performance. But for them, and I'm going to skip a whole here in the video that they had that kind of talks about everything to where they show the actual comparison numbers. And in that, somewhere in here, but they basically do this thing where they talk about the release of each of the cards. And in their comparison chart, they basically showed that every version, here we are, of this card is faster than the top end of the previous generation.
And that is mad, right? I think that's the first time in years we've seen that kind of performance gain, right?
So what they're showing is that, and like I said, they have a later one than this graphic, but they released that 3080 and say that in performance, in some cases, it can be as much as double the performance of a 2080 in certain situations. And again, compared to because this chart's interesting, it's price per performance is what the chart is. They're showing that the 3080, it exceeds every current thing. This one shows 1080s, and they're showing it based on just regular, or what they're showing in this one is the RTX hit that used to happen, that their new RTX settings fixed a lot of the issues with how much RTX hurt, I guess, the previous, the 2000 series cards right now. When you'd enable RTX right now, it really hits the performance and like drops it. Like it's still playable because the 20 series cards are very fast, but my 1080 without RTX would run faster than a 2080 with RTX in a lot of games. And so that's where they're kind of saying, ooh, RTX has a huge hit. And they were able to go back through, revitalize it with the new series cards. They're saying you can actually run, in this case, a 3080 with RTX on, can run whatever game at 4K over 60 frames per second, whereas a 1080 Ti running that same game without RTX can't do the full 4K. things like that. So they're just showing that the comparison of jump in performance is significant throughout. But yeah, that was a huge comment point in general about this generation of the cards coming out, is that they're showing an update of basically across the board. It's going to outperform everything that is currently in their generation of 2000 series cards. That there's nothing they have today that's going to beat it. And so that by itself got a lot of people just thinking, what the heck? We weren't expecting that. So when they announced those prices...
A lot of the memes that I've been seeing around this have been people saying, like, last year it was all about Nvidia against other companies, right? Like how they're doing against all the other competitors. This year is like Nvidia versus Nvidia.
That's actually pretty funny.
Themselves for some reason.
Well, but again, it shows they've been working on this for some time. And I've seen some interesting conversation about why these price points are what they are, because one of the other things they said, the lower one, the 3070, right, is supposed to outperform a 2080 Ti across the board. And a 2080 Ti today costs $1,200. Okay? Yeah. They're releasing that card for $499 next month.
Yeah, it's just... it feels like they shot themselves in the foot in some respects, but I think it's also probably because they realized that a lot of people who have already recently spent money wouldn't upgrade otherwise. So I think this is actually a sort of...
This is the Atari 2600 problem, but with the engineering and marketing department that understands what you have to do in technology. So to go back, it was... so the Atari 2600 came out in 76 or 78, something like that. And by the time 82 rolled around, the technology was old. And they needed to do a new home console to keep up with the other, with Intellivision and ColecoVision specifically. And Warner Brothers, who had bought Atari, in between the release of the 2600 and the sort of crash in 83, didn't want to do another technology platform. They just wanted to push as many games as they possibly could in current gen tech, right? But you can't do that if your current gen tech is behind your competitors in the market. Like, you have to come out with the next thing.
Yep.
So in this case, and what Nvidia is doing is shooting itself in the foot. Yes, but they are not giving anybody else the opportunity to come up with something new.
Yeah.
Like, this is also, we could phrase it as the Daikatana problem. Whereas Daikatana started its development on the Quake 1 engine, and then id goes to CES and shows off Quake 2.
And they're like, we got to use the Quake 2 engine.
And Romero goes, well, we can't design our game on that old trash. We have to totally redesign it for the new thing, right?
Yep, and skip it forward to when Daikatana actually came out.
Yeah.
They did that a dozen times and the game sucked because they were too busy chasing tech.
Precisely. So they didn't have the Omni technical. Let me try that again. Fresh meat. They didn't have the Omni. They didn't have the Omni technical guy doing the graphics engines like id did at Ion Storm. So they had to chase rather than coming up with the tech themselves. So rather than giving Bob's graphics card company a chance to come up with a half step better than the 2000 series of graphics cards, Nvidia's just like, no, we're not going to give you a chance to recover from the body blow of the 2000 series cards. We're going to hit you with the Mike Tyson left hook with the 3000 series cards to just put you on the mat.
Well, and
sensible.
There's been a lot of conversation about this because one of the things that they are having to look at this year, right, with competition, is that we're going to get releases from AMD across multiple levels, both in a new type of video card for PCs and in 2 new consoles coming out this shopping season that are going to be running AMD GPUs. So a lot of the conversation came up saying that there's expectation that essentially they priced that 3070 where they did, and they're releasing it now with the time frame as a direct way to say, look, we know these new things are coming out, but look at us. Bam. And look how far up our technology is. So everyone who's currently a PC gamer is like, sweet, I can stay here and enjoy my space.
This is going to sound a little PCMR, but I don't care. PCMR. No console kitty is going to stop buying their console because of the possibility of 4K gaming on a PC.
No, absolutely not.
Right? You, Wayne, certainly will. And I 100% get it, but I don't know that I'm going to.
That's fair. I mean, like, for me...
I am not... So just to give you perspective and context for this, I am not the graphophile that you are, Wayne, at all. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Which is, I'm not crapping on it. It's different strokes to move the world. Right? So to me, let's say that I'm pleased when my thing is on above 30 frames per second, and I think anything above 60 is sauce. Because certainly I'm not going to be able to tell the difference.
I agree. Yep.
So...
see, you guys don't play the right games for it.
It bothers me more that the fans on my graphics card run rather than I guess I have to play this game at 3440 by 1440 resolution with most of the bells and whistles that I can't tell if they're on or not anyway turned to medium or low or off.
So
right.
Well, there's other aspects to this technology that's very interesting, right? Because they're also talking about the efficiency of the next generation of cards. That cooling solution they talk about, actually, they say runs 30%, what was it? 30% quieter and 20% cooler than the current generation of 20 series cards that they've released because of the new heat pipes and everything done. Now, even though it has a higher actual power draw, because this one, they showed that the 3080, I think it's at a 320 watt or something like that, just over 300. The 3070 was somewhere in the range of 250, and the 3090 is like 350 or 360 watt TDP for it or something, or what it wants you to have. It's going to be running, and so they're saying it's significantly more efficient as well, and across the board with everything they're doing. So everything you currently do with graphics, it's going to do better, as well as some of the technology they showed includes their tie-in with other types of rendering engines. So there's the raw horsepower that the card will do for gaming, right? And that is a big part and something I'm definitely a fan of. I like the video file aspects of it. But they're also talking about with some of the other technology they're showing. There's things, that are also supported. They're finally putting HDMI 2.1 support in there, which gives you a 48 gigabit per second bandwidth for your video signal, which allows for, like they showed with the 3090, the ability for them to push that gaming at 8K 60 frames per second, which is silly. And there's a piece there with the price discussion too, where the 3090, a lot of people are like, holy cow, how can your your top card, because that's not their flagship, the 3080 is, that the 3090 is, how is that $1,500? That's insane. They're like, no. Last generation, the RTX Titan card, which they sell, only Nvidia sells, it's their 24 gig one that has all the features, it's $2,500. They actually released the faster Titan as a 3090 now at $1,000 less, and it's going to be available from any manufacturer that wants to build it, unlike the old Titan, which was only from Nvidia. So they're actually opening it up across the board. And they themselves say, don't buy a 3090 unless you're doing high-end rendering, 8K gaming, or these other very fringe-level things.
Yeah, of course.
But even if you do, it's so much faster than the current.
And the prize you get for spending $1,500 on a graphics card is the need to spend $3,000 on an 8K
monitor
8K display.
For something. Yeah, right. So those are such a fringe thing that not any normal gamer doing. And Nvidia out the gate is saying, do not buy this for gaming. And when they announced it in the thing, they said, we were surprised how many people were buying Titans. That's not the point of them. But we started seeing the application of them, which is simulators and stuff like that with 3 4K displays. Yeah, then running a Titan starts to help and having 24 gigs of memory. So that's specifically
I'm something like that for AI purposes, right? Because
so that's where they talk about
machine learning to a GPU, and then it's incredibly useful. I mean,
and they
some of the high-powered computing work
yeah,
I do uses Titans, right?
Yep, and they talked about how it'll render and everything out there like Maya and stuff like that, and other programs that do 3D rendering, that do straight, because they talked about it all being linear algebra type based processing it can do. So anything that does hardcore, just number crunching, a GPU is better than that than a CPU. And so yes, that's what it's for, as well as, and this is another discussion people had, because you could, for the price of a Titan or 3090, you could buy two 3080s, but don't. Because they got rid of SLI, except for on the Titans, basically, on the 3090. That's the only one that has an SLI link. Because that is so that they can, in a true, and if you go to supercomputing forums and stuff, watch where they use GPUs for that kind of processing. That's what that is for, is to put those together. Not for your regular gaming, because nobody even supports SLI gaming anymore in the reality. Other things that this supports now is the new PCI Express 4.0 spec. And so right now that means only AMD boards will take advantage of it, because their newest ones have PCI Express 4. Nothing from Intel does yet that I'm aware of. They also added in things like Av1 Decode Support, which is some new proprietary thing, but it's supposed to allow you to, if you have one of these cards, decode a signal coming to you from a streaming service like Twitch at 1440p by 120 hertz. So if you're watching content that's at these higher refresh, higher resolution, it's supposed to handle it without it being a huge processing load on the CPU. They're doing a new low latency technology in RTX that anything down to, I think, the 1080 series or the 10 series cards will also get. It's a update on their G-Sync display capabilities to minimize the latency between a frame getting rendered and being put on the screen. So they're doing things there that are supposed to reduce that delay by up to 50%. So you're getting like 20 millisecond or less response times for things actually processing and getting in front of your eyeballs. So they're showing technology to improve that. They, it's interesting because I saw some other renders and stuff in discussions, but for like a specific games, and this is where they say 2x performance, right? They're saying standard things like Borderlands 3 or Doom Eternal. I've seen a lot of the videos of Doom Eternal. Tells me that engine's also just awesome by itself. But a 2070 Super running like Doom Eternal, they do as their 1.0 benchmark, and they say that the 3080 is basically just under double the performance of what that 2070 Super does today in Doom Eternal. And then they show some of the ones with like RTX on, one of these games that really take hits, that's where they're showing performance gains over everything else with the ways that's improved. They showed, that's another conversation though, in general, the RTX side. So ray tracing, again, pretties, lights, rendering, and trying to get things more realistic lighting in games. For me, it's great. It's atmospheric. It does provide better things like reflections and all that kind of stuff. It is just whiz bang. But
that kind of stuff, I don't. Earlier on, when Octil said he wasn't a graphics file, a visuals file,
graphic file.
Graphic file. I am if it were free. Just that my price to outcome is a lot higher, right? Like it's just not worth it for me. So I like when you talk about these lights and stuff. I'm sitting here thinking like, yeah, I would love that. Like, and I remember when I saw your, the TV in your living room, where it's OLED display. I was like, holy crap, that's beautiful. I would never buy that, but that's beautiful.
So what's really cool about it, they did show a kind of several showcases of what those graphics can look like. And so one of the ones they showed was a marbles display, because they had done this with the older cards, and they had done it with like a single light render or single marble rendered and they showed at the original one that was running at 720p, and it was running at like 30 frames per second. This demo they ran at 1440p, 60 frames per second, with significantly more lights on, all RTX, all rendered real time. And they were just showing like even that the performance is jumping so much. As this is playing, one of the things I'm going to talk about, what's interesting, is where ray tracing is a new thing that for gaming that Nvidia pushed to say, look, this is something we think really makes a difference. And there's a handful of games today that utilize it. One of the things that we are seeing is that with the launch of this, they had a good list of probably 8 or 10 new AAA games, or even some older games that are doing the updates, that are bringing RTX to them, including some of the biggest ones out there like Fortnite, whether we love or hate, is going to add RTX support. So what it means, and they talked about it going through not necessarily their own proprietary RTX, but the fact that they're using the updated, the updated DirectX 12, it has another letter like H or something, but the Super DirectX 12 version that has the DirectX ray tracing in it. So in a more open form. And so what's nice about that is that means we should be able to see Unity Engine, anything Unreal Engine, and the same RTX kind of, or ray tracing effects happen in non-Nvidia hardware. So it also means that when AMD announces their cards later this year that are supposed to be able to support ray tracing, and the fact that the new consoles are supposed to support ray tracing, it's one of those things that we're going to start seeing, I think, implemented in pretty much every new game coming out, because you're going to start getting it, as you said, Ken, for free. It's one of those things that all the new hardware is going to support it, so why wouldn't a developer start putting it in? All the current game engines support it. You kind of just turn it on and make sure you have lights and materials defined. And all the new libraries are doing in such a way that's boom. Here they were showing they were doing all that kind of glow effects and things like that with the lighting in all of those marbles at once versus the original demo having one.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pause because your nerding out is too impressive to me. This demo is like if Little Big Planet and Marble Madness had dirty sex with each other.
Oh, I see this. I'm like, so please make the game based on this. Don't just show me the prettiness. Let me play that game. Because I loved Marble Madness back in the day.
Show me Marble Madness 2020.
Right? That would be it. Right? Wouldn't it be awesome?
No, it's exactly like this. And you mixed it down with the Little Big Planet stuff so you can customize your marble. And make it all kinds of colors or whatever. Hell yes.
So they have several videos they show that were showcasing just kind of the general looks. They had the Doom Eternal video they were showing where, and most people like the Doom one is almost silly in the sense that it's like, but the performance is already so good, does it matter? Right? And so they show this because they're showing it versus, I think, the 2080. And the 2080 is running this almost continuously at over 60 frames per second and some. In most cases, it shows it between 90 to 100 frames per second. And this is a 2080 Ti, so the 1200 card.
New Doom games are just gorgeous.
They're so good. Oh my! On my 1080, I can run this at 60 frames per second at 4K. That's how good this engine is. But what they show is the exact same scene on the new 3080 is running at least 50% faster in many cases. This one they're showing is like 70 on the old 70 to 90. The new one's between 115 to 130 something frames per second for the exact same scenes. And so they're just nothing else showing in a current generation title. If you were just to upgrade that generation to the next, you're seeing anywhere from 30 to 50% performance bumps in that, which is, I mean, that's just raw numbers, right? For someone like me at a 1080 who can run it at 4K with everything on without the RTX, right? And I'm getting 50 to 60 frames per second and it's great. To go from 50 to 60 to, in like this scene, almost 150 to 160 frames per second, that's so ridiculous. It means I can have everything on, and not even worry about a hiccup. And this is not even running, I think, the DLSS stuff that Babs had mentioned up before. And they're seeing frame rates as high as like 180 to 200 frames in some of these like cutscene-ish looking parts. It's just so ridiculous on what they're doing. They also showcased one that was really pretty because they're talking about this is current, what's out there and beautiful. Another one they talked about was Cyberpunk 2077. The new one coming out someday. We'll see when. But they showed a lot of the they were focusing on the reflections and things in this game and the lighting because it's going to be a little more lot to see, if you will. Doom's very fast-paced Twitch. This is much more enjoy the ambiance and the whole world of it. But they're showing like the reflections, the glowing lights and things like that going on in it that just look beautiful. And so knowing that that's all coming in addition, I'm super excited for. And again, for me, this is like the perfect upgrade for where I'm sitting at right now.
DLSS.
DLSS.
It seems like with the price point as well, I think they really, regardless of them, trying to outcompete competitors and the previous line, I think a large part of the reason that the price point is lower is because with this set of releases and this set of cards, they want to bring in the general upgrader, not just the high-end upgrader, right? They don't just want to sell a bunch of Titans this time. They want to sell they want to upgrade everybody. They want to bring in
so here's the funny thing, right?
They're do that. Even I'm
because for someone like me, I was looking at the initial prospective prices before they announced it. Were that the 3080 equivalent, or what is the 3080? People were saying 850 was the kind of the on the street everyone expected. And at 850, I was looking at it like, yeah, it's enough of an upgrade. I'm probably going to try to make that work. And people were talking about the 3090 being like $2,000, right? That was what people were expecting. Then they announce it and they say, actually $699, like $150 less than what you were even kind of like maybe expecting. And for me, it becomes I was going to try to see if I could make 850 work. Making 700 work is way easier. And I know people who bought...
I got to spend some money now. It's kind of what it's like, yeah.
I know people who bought 2080 Ti's, right, for $1,200. So for them to see that they could now instead buy a Titan for maybe $200 to $300 more than what they spent for a 2080 Ti, I know people who were like, well, I'll just get a 3090. And I'm the one saying, that's dumb. You don't need it. The 3080 will do all of that and it's half the price for what you need in there. But you got the people who just like to play the numbers.
But I want the best.
and I won't stop people from doing that, but I don't recommend it.
Not only that, I still think that there's a mental or perhaps emotional aspect of stretching at the time with the intention of leapfrogging a generation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you're saving money by spending money. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I always have looked at my hardware updates as something that should carry me many years forward. And honestly, my 1080 will continue. It can play, and it plays everything.
And I'm sorry I missed it in the chat. I think Guro was talking about it. But something that I was thinking about as you were talking about all of these performance numbers, the North Bridge on my motherboard is 8 years old.
Yes. Will you suffer from that bandwidth limitation? Likely. But there's still...
So, I mean, I know the choke point's not my graphics card anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's where you move it.
And it hasn't been. The processor in my PC is 8 years old. The RAM that I have is from 2014, I think. Right? Like, I haven't upgraded a computer part other than graphics card since I bought this computer in 2012.
Yeah.
Like, it's all still working. So, like, at some point I am going to have to take the plunge on a whole new system just to get... Just to realize the performance improvements.
If you're concerned
that I'm getting from this ridiculous graphics card that I just cut out a kidney to buy.
If the concern is that you're not going to eke out every frame from an upgrade, yes, you would need the full architecture to get every little nuance out. But because it's also a technology bump, some of the things they're doing is they're talking about using kind of, how we heard Sony talk all this big jazz about how fast you're going to be able to stream off their proprietary hard drive SSD so that no load screens kind of thing. Yeah. Nvidia just said, yeah, we've been working with Intel and the whole connectivity thing when it comes to how hard drive streams data off of SSDs. And we're basically doing that for the PC as well. We have a new set of architecture that these new series cards, and it'll back up, I think, to the 10 series as well, that'll allow things to preload and use some of the bandwidth things and compression they've got now in the card capability of moving that data so that you'll be able to get these SSDs to move data directly into the RAM on the video card and bypass a lot of the other pieces of the North Bridge and stuff like that. And so they're finding ways to optimize even your data moving. And so that's why I say this launch is more than just the raw horsepower of hardware. It's also the features they're doing. And like one of the things Babs mentioned earlier about the DLSS is that that's doing, and for people who don't understand it, right, I said earlier, it's where you render something at a lower resolution, but then use these algorithms to upscale it. This is showing, was it Death Stranding? And they're showing that they're running basically without it on at 20 to 30 frames per second at 4K, with it on 70 plus frames per second. And so what it's really doing is it's rendering at essentially 1080p, but when you look at the graphic fidelity of what's being pushed to the screen at 4K, it's actually better in most cases than what the true native 4K rendered resolution is.
Because I mean, you can certainly tell in that video with the DLSS on, everything on the DLSS side is sharper.
Yeah. And because the algorithm they're showing is actually pulling detail out that the original 4K textures don't have. Because the algorithm was able to say, I realize these are words and they should look like this and have these hard edges. Bam, there you go. And so they're showing examples there of games that currently struggle to get like 60 frames per second, especially when you start turning on all the rendering, that if what you are real concerned with is what your eyes see and not what the numbers behind the scenes are doing, you're going to want to turn on DLSS for everything that supports it. And a big one is like Grand Theft Auto 5, of an older one that does use it. And I've seen a lot of videos from the 1.0 generation technology where they were able to now run it at a lot more clean, you know, as they're rendering the whole city, like 60 frames per second at 4K on different hardware. So this one should be able to take that even steps beyond. And they say the fidelity of this 2.0 is significantly better than what the 1.0 rendition was. So that's a piece of tech and technology they're talking about that I'm like, man, that's cool. What are some of the other ones they did? Because that's the thing. Oh, so the big one for us, and this is one that I was like, hey, is you guys remember when I basically showed you and talked about the whole like that I'm using right now, the Nvidia voice that's going on right now? Well, they're continuing that, but into the next generation. And they decided to go beyond voice. So what they're doing in the next generation with this is they're coming out with a new software suite or app called Nvidia Broadcast. So for all the streamers out there, what this is going to provide is what we already have seen with the voice and the ability to do real-time noise cancellation, which is pretty darn cool. They're going to do that with video for your webcam. And so in doing that, there's programs out there right now that you can do that kind of do like virtual green screen, virtual chroma key, where it'll see the edges of you sitting there in front of your desk and your backgrounds, whatever, that it can kind of virtually blur. We see it on Skype, right? You can turn on the filter on Skype to kind of blur other aspects of the feed. Some work better than others, but it's out there. They're going to do it such that you can do that with wherever you're at because the card's going to do the heavy lifting for it. And they're also going to let you, because now once you've been able to blur, you can do things like completely get rid of your background and do things like supplement your background with something else. And we've seen that in a lot of these current voice chatting things that are out there. They're going to build these all into like an app for anyone who's using NVIDIA hardware from the 20 series up that it'll support. Now, if it's anything like voice, you'll be able to just go into the install exe and tell it no install regardless of what series card I have, because it does a check. And that's how they limit it. Because I'm using voice on a 1080 and it's not supposed to work. Works fine.
Cheeky.
Yeah, it's those artificial limitations. But I love that they're going a step further and saying we understand our market, right? And why not take this technology we've been playing with and apply it to even more? And so if I suddenly end up with 3080 and suddenly you see me sitting, you know, and the effects behind me constantly are changing or whatever, but when I'm streaming for games and stuff and I do the whole cool thing where it's just me and the world's got, that's going to be the hardware of the 3080 doing it. And how cool is that? And another feature that actually one that I really liked, here's the video for it, that I like is that when we talk, we keep all of us here on our stream, right? It's kind of figuring out how best to frame ourselves in our video feed. They've got a feature where you can actually artificially kind of zoom in a little bit and make it so that they can focus on your face. So he's talking about the noise and stuff like that. And then he gets into somewhere in there. He's doing the like noise cancellation. Yay. Here he's getting into the like, you can change your background out. And if you note, his background of the room is just clutter, which is normal. But then the other cool one he does is he does this virtual zoom in thing that it has virtual face tracking. And so in this one, if you set it to a certain length that it has extra boundary around you, you can tell it to follow your face. And in doing so, once it's on, it'll actually pan and move the camera with you. So he turns it on, and now as he's looking around and stuff, it kind of keeps him centered, and it virtually moves the pan around. And so there's all these. Is it necessary? I don't think so. But could you do some fun, cool things with it, and takes away a lot of the thought from you having to do it yourself? Those are things that I think are an addition cool to what NVIDIA is putting out there. Just like more tech with the power of their machine learning, the routines in the AI, and what they're already figuring out people are using their hardware for. So that was another tech piece I saw that was like, actually, that's really cool, and I will probably use to some extent. And it may make it so maybe my update here where I get the HDMI out from the nice DSLR isn't needed anymore because I just use the webcam and I use some effects in the video card to make it look as good. You know, so I'm kind of down with all of those kind of upgrades that go along with I'm also going to game faster. And so maybe I am geeking out a bit in the general idea of what tech is happening around this. But I think it's such a significant change and update from what we've been seeing in like the incremental things, and that they finally hit a real version 2.0 essentially of a lot of the technology they introduced with the 20 series cards. And so that's some of what I'm excited for, I guess, or looking at with this. And because of the price point, I see it being like this legit could be meaningful. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? So you've heard me rant on in that. I mean, one, am I a buy? Yes, I'm a buy, and I'm looking at a 3080. How about you guys?
I love gaming, but the gaming that I do is not nearly high end or recent out like releases for me to even consider getting a Windows computer which can have a nice card. Like, I am perfectly pleased with just screwing around on my Mac that I got from work. That's pretty powerful anyway, and that's fine by me. I mean, yeah, I do miss certain things, but like for me right now, that my life is good enough as is. And my console does make up the rest, right? I mean, which I know that I do prefer PC gaming over that, but generally speaking, I'm satisfied. So I don't feel any need.
Gotcha.
And I'm the guy that when I started playing the Outer Worlds and would alt tab out and the fans on my 2080 would start to spin up, panicked and went, okay, I'm never doing that again. And well, because again, I'm looking at these things as long-term purchases. Like, I don't want 30% of the cost of my computer to be disposable.
Yeah.
Equipment. So, like, I bought a 2080 last year. It worked fine. I never play with all the settings turned on. Because, you know, if the PC dies, like, that's panic.
I do understand
I'm gonna have to
that.
rebuild it from scratch, and I haven't built a computer in 8 years. And even then, I had somebody else build it for me. So yeah, all of the stuff looks awesome. In the perfect world, like, I would just, as soon as they became available, I would get it and put it on the company's tab and no problem. Right? I have to be a little bit more responsible than that, sadly, considering that's what I did last year. So, I mean, I'm probably not buying one in 2021. I'm skeptical about the cooling bit.
Okay.
Only because I have a fan in the top of my case that I think is sucking air in.
Okay.
Which means I either have to reverse the direction of that fan, which is not necessarily all that hard, right? But I have to reverse the direction of that fan to take the air that's being blown out the top of the back of the graphics card and blow it totally out of the case.
Well, so
Right.
that admittedly, that's if you were to choose a reference, essentially reference design one, right? Because
Right.
you can. There's been one company so far that's released an image for their rendition of a 3080, and that's EVGA. And depending on your sensibilities of what you think a video card should look like, theirs is going to be an interesting take on it. Because now, granted, the reference board is short. Apparently, from a manufacturer, you can do longer boards if you choose. They're doing kind of the classic to an X degree version of a triple fan solution with full on RGB everywhere and the fans blowing in kind of your traditional today's case format. And that one's funny because it actually, when you look at it compared, it is still a dual slot card, but the fan riser's high enough, it's a 3-slot card. Same as like the 3090, where the 3080 is a true 2-slot card. As a thing that I look at the first aftermarket one, I'm like, gee whiz, as well as like maybe it's because they're showing off RGB, and I guess if you're a gamer, it needs to be garish. But Nvidia's reference design, they said, has lighting, but it's very subtle. It's like not like this thing that's rainbow.
You know, when the big games that you stream are barely get the bottom of your feet wet shallow, like all you've got is swag. So your graphics card and the case have to be as swaggy as possible.
True. Now, I am curious because, Kuro, you bring up some good points in the chat about, yes, I too want to wait for legit test numbers to come out. And I expect, since the 3080 comes out September 17th, the 3090 is like the 30th, and the 3070 is next month. But I expect those versions are out there now, and whatever the moratorium on release date is for the numbers, I'll be surprised if we don't get some true benchmarks before the 3080 actually hits shelves. The other piece of that conversation, though, is before we end the show here, is that, yes, the reference prices are those, and I forget, were third-party numbers higher or lower than NVIDIA's reference? Because I remember Founders Edition cards from NVIDIA always costing like $100 to $150 more than what I could go buy the EVGA or the Asus or whatever branded card of it like 2 months later. And so I'll be curious when you say like, what are the real prices and stuff? Do you expect those prices to go up or down based on what the NVIDIA price is? And I don't remember, because I thought last generation NVIDIA prices were higher than what you get from third party. I may be remembering that wrong. But if that is true and I can get a 3080 from Asus for like, you know, a good $100 cheaper, you know, and get it for $599, then it's just like a no-brainer to me. But I also do understand, Todd, when you're talking about if you already have a 2000 series card, I can understand waiting and seeing what comes out beginning of next year. I could see waiting to see like when you know they're going to announce a 3060 or a 3050 at some point, and it'll be interesting to see what they do for laptop type situations with these series cards. And I'm assuming personally they're holding the 3060 until after AMD releases their next cards, because they're going to want to be able to price point based off that. Because if AMD comes out and they say our mid-range cards, you know, our card that can't compete with the 3080 but can the 3070 is $399 or something, or, you know, just under something it. But then NVIDIA turns around and says, look, we've now released a 3060 that actually beats that AMD card and $299 or something like that. I expect they're holding their cards for something like that. And so it'll be interesting to see.
The other thing to think about is that if we're going to get a new generation of cards every other year or every third year, like for me, if I waited until my next RTX said 4000 something, like I'm not going to be like, I'm right now, the video games I play are maps.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah. Yep. So,
and all the actual technology that's come out, your cards will support.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're fine, because and that's one thing I'm giving them. They're not completely crapping on people who bought the current generation RTX cards. They're just showing that, yeah, we did build better silicon because it's at an 8 nanometer process. It's a bigger die significantly than previous cards. It's the biggest they've ever done.
Sure.
It's got faster memory. All these other tweaks are doing. So for, I think, everybody across the board, it's a benefit, I think, to the industry. We're getting better hardware. Hopefully they'll push people to push their hardware further. And the PC Master Race, we get our little bit of things. Yes, for an additional $700. Screw you, next generation consoles. Went to use our normal thumb at it of saying like we can spend more money to get this percentage upgrade. All right.
All right, and with that, we are at the end of the show, and we haven't even talked for 1 second about our main topic.
Well, no, this was half of our main topic, and I just chose to start with this one because I knew I'd have more to say.
Okay,
well, that's fine.
60 seconds. They put Neuralink in pigs. It's awesome. People are talking about medical applications for it. I'm looking at the step after that when they start low-jacking people. And when there will be direct brain access to the internet, and in science fiction world, the digital preservation of the self.
Yep, I had a big discussion earlier on today about this actually in prep for the show, and we ended up talking about Star Trek, and when you teleport one person from one place to another, are they still themselves? If you install hard drives that can keep your memory in, then you move all your memories into the hard drive, and then you turn off the main brain. Are you still alive? And all this stuff. Next time on ShowX.
Yeah, no, I agree. I still think there's a lot to be said for it, because this is just another step down the lines of us becoming much more close to technology. All right.
Yep.
It is time for us to go.
It's not if, it's a when.
Ken, lead us out today, sir.
You have been listening to ShowX probably on Twitch, but maybe also on YouTube or Facebook. So thank you very much for listening, and we very much do appreciate it. If you want to support the show, and we hope you do, you can support us mostly by helping us grow naturally. So share us on Twitch, subscribe, do all that stuff. Share us on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever else, Reddit and such. We appreciate all that. You can find us on twitter.com/VtWShowX, twitter.com/drkenread for the show, for Mr. Wayne, for myself. You can find us on Facebook by searching for Show Space X, and you'll find us there. Now Wayne in charge of handling that, because I have left the lands of Facebook behind. You can also find us on reddit.com/r/ShowX, where you can take part in the after show discussion. That's like our main hub now, hopefully, for this kind of stuff, instead of the forums. So go along there and take part. We could really do with some people commenting and replying to each video and telling us what you think, and cross-posting to other subreddits and such. We'd appreciate that. If you also want to support the show in other ways, you can do so by going to patreon.com/VtWShowX, and that will you can give us a minimum of $1 per month, which helps keep our show afloat, both in terms of software licenses, hardware requirements, and all that jazz. So thank you so much for listening today. We very much appreciate it. And thank you for being here as well, Todd, and thank you very much for hosting all the technical side of stuff and being here too, Mr. Wayne.
Outstanding. Well, and thank you guys for checking out. If you have anything you'd like to comment on what we've been talking about, please email in the show at VtWShowX@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, as well as anything we might have missed, because you see how we go when we start talking about what we like. But with that, we are out of here, everybody, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye.
Goodbye. See you next.